And the last section of Chapter 9 is Section 4, The Limits of Prosperity. And we're going to discuss how the market revolution affected the lives of workers, women, and African Americans. And just like the title of the section says, with all this prosperity throughout the nation, there were its limits. There were some groups who were not able to reap the benefits of the market revolution. So let's talk first about liberty and prosperity. With the market revolution, the right to compete for economic advancement became essential to American freedom. Symbols of liberty were bound up with symbols of prosperity. The stories of men like John Jacob Astor, the son of a poor German immigrant who became the richest man in America by using money earned from shipping to invest in Manhattan real estate, seemed to embody opportunities open to the self-made man. This success was achieved not through hereditary privilege or government favoritism, as in Europe, but through hard work and intelligence. The market revolution and expanding commercial life enriched bankers, merchants, industrialists, and planters, and produced a new middle class of clerks, accountants, and other professionals such as teachers, doctors, and lawyers. So remember, the key idea is that this idea of liberty and prosperity were closely tied together. Race and opportunity. But not everyone benefited from the market revolution. Most African Americans were slaves, but even free blacks were excluded from economic opportunities. Free blacks in northern states experienced discrimination in every sphere of life. They were segregated into the poorest and most unhealthy areas of cities like New York, Philadelphia, and Cincinnati, and were subjected to assaults in riots by white mobs. They were barred from schools and other public facilities, and created their own institutional life of schools and churches, such as the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Many blacks experienced downward economic mobility, being unable to practice their craft skills because of discrimination by white employers and workers, and were relegated to the most unskilled and menial low-paid labor. Blacks also could not take advantage of the opening of the West, since federal law barred blacks from accessing public land, and some western states prohibited them from even entering their territory. So I want to make one connection to the present. There's lots that is said about African Americans sometimes, about their communities, especially in the inner cities, those kinds of things. But what we need to remember is that what we see today is a result of policies and decisions made by our society and by our government in the past. So already we see in the early 1800s how African Americans are forced to live in a particular place and are denied opportunity. And this is going to be something that happens for almost 200 years. So to expect a group of people to change that overnight is impossible. It'd be impossible of any group of people. So just want you to understand that the situation that groups of people, African Americans, any other kind of minority, finds himself in today, it's a result of hundreds of years of institutionalized racism. So I'm not saying to make excuses for any particular person or group of people, but we have to realize the historiography behind our modern times. Okay? Next is a cult of domesticity. Many opportunities created by the market revolution were also closed to women. As the household declined as a site of economic production, women's traditional roles were undermined by mass-produced goods once made at home. Some women entered factories, while others embraced a new definition of femininity centered in women's ability to create a private sphere in the home removed from the competitive tensions of the market. Here, her role was not to produce things, but to sustain non-market values such as love, friendship, and mutual obligation, providing men with a shelter from the rigors of the market. Earlier ideas of Republican motherhood were replaced by this cult of domesticity. Virtue came to be defined as a personal quality associated with women who were expected to be sexually innocent, beautiful, frail, and dependent on men. The cult of domesticity minimized even women's indirect participation in public life, viewing women as nurturing, selfless, and ruled by emotions, while men were seen as rational, aggressive, and domineering. While men could move freely between the public and private spheres, women were to remain confined within the private family. Women and work. But the cult of domesticity did not capture the realities of life for the many women who worked for wages at least part of their lives. Women who worked outside of the home could not compete freely for jobs, since only low-paying jobs were open to them, and married women could not sign their own contracts or, until after the Civil War, keep their own wages, which went to their husbands. Many poor women worked as domestic servants, factory workers, and seamstresses. For the middle class, however, respectability was earned in part by keeping wives and children at home and hiring women to do housework in middle class homes, which were segregated in neighborhoods distant from other classes. Even working class men adopted these values and protested that capitalism was ripping women from the home and subjecting them to exploitation and abuse in the marketplace. The early labor movement. Many Americans experienced the market revolution as a loss of freedom. The economy suffered a sharp recession in 1819, a depression starting in 1837, and several downturns in between, all of which caused high levels of unemployment and reduction in wages. While the economic transformations of the market revolution greatly expanded America's output and trade and increased living standards, it also widened the gap in wealth and income between wealthy merchants and industrialists and workers and the poor, especially in the urban Northeast. So because of this growing inequality, labor issues would arise. And the last section of Chapter 9, the liberty of living. Worried by the erosion of their traditional skills and the danger of being reduced to dependent wage earners, skilled craftsmen in the late 1820s created the world's first working men's parties. These were short-lived political organizations that sought to mobilize lower-class support for candidates who demanded free public education, an end to imprisonment for debt, and laws limiting work to 10 hours per day. In the 1830s, unions were organized and strikes were common. Wage earners protesting social conditions and pressing for political demands invoked ideas of freedom and independence from the Revolutionary era to justify their claims. They even compared their status to slaves, using the term wage slavery. Thus, even while the market revolution offered opportunities to many Americans, it also generated anxieties and protests that came to be reflected in politics. And it's those politics that we're going to discuss in Chapter 10. So that is the end of Chapter 9, Section 4, and the entire chapter. If you have questions over Section 4 or anything in the chapter, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.